The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
The candidates, the races, your vote. This is 17 News, your local election headquarters.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this election day. I'm Maddie Jansen.
And I'm Alex Fisher. If you haven't already voted, the time to do so is now. Polls open in less than 2 hours, and you'll have until 8 p.m. to get in your ballot. 17 News is your local election headquarters, and it is the final push to get out the vote as candidates look to convince you they deserve to be your representative.
If you haven't already voted, you still have plenty of time. Polls are set to open in just under 2 hours, and they'll stay open until the clock strikes tonight. But if you feel a little lost in this election process, don't stress.
But we have complete team coverage to help you make an informed decision. Our Bob Price will join us in just a bit to shed some light on the confusing and sometimes contradictory messaging in these races. And we'll also check in with Chris Burton, who will go over the information you need to know in order to cast your vote in time.
But we begin with 17 News' political reporter Maddie Gannon, who breaks down the races you'll see on your ballot and the things to look out for. Maddie.
Alex, Maddie, it's bound to be an exciting night. Some of California's most competitive races are right here in the Central Valley. But before we dive into each district, we should point out in California, we have what are called jungle primaries, meaning the top 2 vote getters move on to the general election no matter their party affiliation. So we have a lot to cover. Let's dig into it, starting with the new 20th Congressional District. Here we have Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy seeking re-election. He's being challenged by 2 Democrats, Fairfax Junior High teacher Marisa Wood and Ben Duell. On the right, we have another 2 challengers, Republicans James Davis and Jim McCulley, who moved to Bakersfield, we should note, just to run in the district. Now, the key points you should know about this race. McCarthy is seeking his 9th term in Congress. He's never lost an election, but this is a really significant race for him, not necessarily in terms of his own re-election chances here in Kern, but if the GOP picks up enough seats in the House nationwide, McCarthy is in line to be Speaker. And moving to the new 22nd Congressional District, this is one of the most competitive House races in the nation. It could help determine which party controls the House next year. We have Republican incumbent David Valadao facing off against 5-term Bakersfield Assemblyman Democrat Rudy Salas, as well as 2 other Republicans who consider themselves further to the right than Valadao. That's Chris Matisse and Adam Medeiros. A lot of key points we're keeping an eye on in this contest. Primarily, will Valadao feel the effects of his vote to impeach former President Trump for his role in the January 6th Capitol attack? Medeiros and especially Matisse cited that vote as their main reason for running in the first place. Matisse has been outspoken about his support for the former president. We'll be watching to see how much of the Republican vote these 2 candidates pick up, which could have implications about Trump's popularity nationwide. And Salas is the only Democratic candidate in this blue-leaning district, but Democrats have turned out to the polls in minuscule numbers in the past. We'll be looking to see what kind of turnout they have this time. And turning to the state Senate and the 16th Senate District, we have a packed field here. Current state Senator Democrat Melissa Hurtado, Democratic former Bakersfield Assembly member Nicole Parra, Mayor of Delano Democrat Brian Osorio. And moving to the 2 Republicans, we have David Shepard and Gregory Tatum. Key points you should know in this race. Hurtado originally launched a bid for a Fresno Center district that included her home city of Sanger before switching to this race. It's been a heated campaign season between Hurtado and Parra in particular, with the 2 feuding online. We'll be watching to see how these 2 Democrats do against one another. And Osorio, on the other hand, aligns with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. How he fares in the primary could have implications for how much of a progressive pull we have here in the Central Valley. Lastly, Shepard, a farmer from Porterville, has the backing of Kern's best-known Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, Shannon Grove, Vince Fong. We'll watch to see how this impacts his standing in the race. And in the 12th Senate District, we have Republican Shannon Grove facing off against Democrat Suzanne Gundy. Thoughts to know here: Grove is seeking her 5th term in the California state legislature. If she wins, this will be her last due to term limits. And in the 32nd Assembly District, we have Republican incumbent Vince Fong running unopposed. Now, in the 35th Assembly District, we have 2 Democrats, current Kern 5th District Supervisor Leticia Perez and Bakersfield Dr. Jasmeet Baines. The key point we were looking out for here: both Perez and Dr. Baines will move on to November's general election because there are only 2 candidates. But because there are only 2 candidates, the primaries results should be a strong indicator of who might win in the fall. We'll be watching to see if one candidate pulls away. And now moving to the race to fill Mike Maggart's seat on Kern's Board of Supervisors, we have Maggart's current Chief of Staff, Republican Jeff Flores, former CHP Assistant Chief Republican Brian Smith, and former Bakersfield Homeless Center CEO Democrat Louis Gill. What we're watching for in this race: this is a nonpartisan position, but all 3 candidates have been very open about their party affiliation. Republicans out-register Democrats in the district. We'll be looking to see how big of a role party affiliation plays in the race. Particularly, will Democrats back Gill, and will the Republican vote sway to Flores or Smith? And moving to the 2nd District Supervisor race, here we have incumbent Republican Zach Scribner seeking re-election, facing challenges from Republican former Tehachapi police officer Pete Graff and Libertarian Kelly Cardin. The key point we're watching here: will this race be decided in the primary election on Tuesday? In county races, if a candidate gets 50% plus 1 vote, they win the position without having to be on the ballot again in November. We'll be watching to see if the incumbent current chairman of the board, Scribner, reaches that threshold. And in the race to serve as Kern's auditor, controller, county clerk, registrar of voters, who runs Kern's elections, we should point out, we have Republican Amy Espinoza as well as Republican Mark McKenzie. Key points to watch for here: this position, particularly the registrar of voters part, has been under intense scrutiny this year. Week after week, we've seen residents here in Kern stand up at Board of Supervisors meetings and express concerns with our elections. McKenzie is one of those people. Espinoza, on the other hand, is the current assistant to the position. Many see this race as an outsider versus insider contest, and we'll be looking for which wins out, especially given this race is almost certain to be decided by the primary election results. And the last race we're taking a look at is Kern County Assessor Recorder. Here we have Republicans Laura Avila and Todd Reeves. There's a lot to watch in this typically inconspicuous race. Both candidates are longtime county employees, now pitted against one another, and they both publicly feuded over the last month. This is another race that will also most likely be decided in the primary election. So as you can see, there's a lot to monitor as the results start coming in. We will, of course, update you along the way. In studio, Maddie Gannon, 17 News.
And if you haven't cast your ballot yet, you still have plenty of time. 17's Chris Burton joining us now to break down the ins and outs of voting today and what we need to know. Chris?
Well, Maddie, as you can see behind me, I'm here at the county elections office, and there are no barricades or lines set up out front here, in a stark contrast to last September's recall election. Now, if you voted in that recall election, that's going to be one of the only differences. So whether you voted or not, though, here's everything you need to know to vote today. It's the day that candidates and voters alike have been waiting for. The people of Kern County have their first say in who will represent them in national, state, and local offices. With universal mail-in voting, registered voters have been able to cast their ballot for nearly a month. But today, scores of polling sites will open their doors to those who prefer to vote in person. Our county has safeguards in place to ensure voters aren't able to cast multiple votes or otherwise skew the election results. But that means you'll have to plan ahead no matter how you vote today. If you plan to turn in the ballot you received in the mail, make sure you sign the back of the envelope before mailing it in or dropping it at a polling place. That signature allows election officials to check that it's really you casting your vote. If you're voting in person, bring that mail ballot with you and surrender it at the polling place so officials know you won't be able to vote twice. To find your closest polling place, visit kernvote.com. If you're a registered voter who hasn't received a mail-in ballot, contact the county elections office. Not registered yet? No problem. You can register at the polls today. Just ask for a conditional voter registration form, which will allow your vote to be counted once your voter registration is verified. One other difference between this election and last September's recall, the county will not be doing drive-through drop-off balloting, which means that if you're coming in to turn in your mail-in ballot today, you will need to find some parking. Live at the county elections office, Chris Burton, 17 News.
All right, Chris, thanks so much. 5:34 is our time now, and you've probably been inundated with political campaign ads in your mailbox, on TV, even social media. And if you need help making heads or tails out of it all, here's 17's Robert Price.
If you're as baffled by those Slate mailers that have District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer and Sheriff Donnie Youngblood on the same slate as Governor Gavin Newsom, you're not alone. A few people are a little confused by that. Zimmer and Youngblood have been vocal critics of the liberal California chief executive since day one. Yet here they are, along with 5 other Kern County candidates for nonpartisan office, smiling like one big happy family. What's going on here? Welcome to the world of the Slate mailer, where a candidate or a candidate's campaign consultant can link figurative arms with any national figure they believe could yield positive results on Election Day, regardless of party affiliation. In this case, Kathy Abernathy of Western Pacific Research, the firm that helped boost Kevin McCarthy to power, purchased a local version of the mailer from an outfit called Democratic Voters' Choice. Featured along with Youngblood and Zimmer, both conservative and both running unopposed, are 5 Abernathy clients. 3rd District Supervisor candidate Jeff Flores, Assessor candidate Todd Reeves, County Clerk candidate Mark McKenzie, and Superior Court Judge candidates Michael Caves and Mark Smith. Youngblood and Zimmer didn't seem pleased with the association when 17 News asked them about it last week. The sheriff said he didn't pay, approve, or know about it. "I'm offended," he said in a text message. The DA said she didn't know or approve either. 17 News asked Reeves, McKenzie, and Flores for comment. Flores responded, "My campaign buys as many Slate mailers as we can afford for voter contact. It is fundamental that I communicate with all groups." Reeves said much the same thing. Slates like this allow him to share his message with Democrats. But in a pair of Facebook posts, Bakersfield attorney Joel Andreessen said the slates are misleading because they can cause voters to think the local candidates are in some way supported by the governor and others pictured on the mailer. He indicated he intended to file a complaint with the Attorney General's office. Kathy Abernathy of Western Pacific Research said the mailer sends no misleading messages. "Critics are faking outrage," she said in a statement, "because this mailer and others have gone out to Kern County voters for decades." There's a lot for voters to sort out in this election, and not just in the mail. One of the more controversial is this TV ad funded by a PAC with close ties to McCarthy that portrays fellow Republican Chris Matisse, a vocal Trump supporter, as dangerously liberal, and on some pretty dubious grounds. The ad claims Matisse, who is challenging Republican incumbent David Valadao in the 20th Congressional District, voted years ago as a Fresno City councilman to deny funding to a gang intervention group. But in fact, Matisse simply voted along with 6 of 7 council members to establish or increase funding to 3 gang intervention charities and decrease funding to 2 other charities. Election season, that time of year when there's more than a little head scratching going on. In downtown Bakersfield, Robert Price, 17 News.
2 people are in custody in connection to this weekend's mass shooting in Philadelphia. Police and U.S. Marshals arrested 34-year-old Rashawn Vereen Monday evening. He'll likely face attempted murder, aggravated assault, and several other charges. 18-year-old Karan Garner was arrested earlier in the day on similar charges. 3 people were killed and 11 others injured in Saturday night's shootout in a popular entertainment district of Philadelphia.
We continue to see urgent calls for change following a surge in mass shootings across the U.S. Americans are demanding action from federal lawmakers amid bipartisan talks on Capitol Hill. NBC's Bree Jackson is in Washington this morning with the latest.
The recent surge in mass shootings like this one in Philadelphia are sending panic and fear through communities. According to the Gun Violence Archive, which defines mass shootings as at least 4 people shot, there were 13 incidents just this past weekend, at least 17 people killed. Nationwide, there's growing frustration with inaction from Congress.
Don't be so slow. Absolutely do not be slow. This is a crisis. This is bad. Thoughts and prayers don't work. Sorry, they just don't. That's for the living.
On Capitol Hill, Senator Chris Murphy says there's a sense of urgency to reach a bipartisan agreement on gun reform.
My goal is to reach an agreement by the end of the week.
Democrats are focusing on expanding background checks and raising the age to purchase an assault weapon. The gunmen in both Buffalo, New York and Uvalde, Texas were only 18.
We know the two things that would have stopped this one, if the age was at 21 and also if there was red flag laws that really made a difference.
Republicans are calling for more resources for mental health and school security.
I want to be clear, though, we are not talking about restricting the rights of current law-abiding gun owners.
The bipartisan group of lawmakers still hammering out a deal that they hope will get 60 votes in the Senate as Congress faces pressure to do something. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee holds a hearing on domestic terrorism following the mass shooting in Buffalo that killed 10 black people in a racist attack. The son of one of the victims of the Buffalo shooting is scheduled to testify. In Washington, I'm Bree Jackson for NBC News.
A Florida mother is charged after her 2-year-old fatally shoots her husband. According to reports, the man was playing a video game in one corner of a bedroom when he was shot. Police say the couple's 5-year-old told deputies the 2-year-old shot their father. The mother of the children was taken into custody and faces charges of manslaughter, culpable negligence, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. And now a violent and fiery crash to tell you about in Oildale last night left at least one person dead. Here's a look at the aftermath of the accident. It happened around 5:30 on Woodrow Avenue near Oildale Drive. You can see the top of the vehicle sheared off after the car hit a curb, went airborne, and came to rest in the front yard of a home. One witness described what happened next.
We seen a bunch of smoke and we went over there and we seen the two guys in the car and it was on fire a little bit, and the neighbor, thankfully, she was fast reacting and she grabbed a water hose and sprayed off the car and everything. And the guy in the passenger seat said that he had a pole through his neck and he was seizing.
We know at least one person died in the crash. The condition of the other occupant was not known.
Meantime, another violent and deadly crash overnight, this time on Taft Highway near South 8th Street. It happened just before 9:30 last night. Police say a car was making an illegal U-turn when it crashed into a motorcycle. The motorcyclist was thrown off the bike and landed on the hood of the car and died. The driver and their passenger were also hurt in the crash, but expected to recover.
Some sad news to pass along now. The Bakersfield Police Department is mourning the loss of another one of its retired canines. Canine Bronx served with his handler, Sergeant Chris Dalton, from January 2010 until his retirement in January 2018. BPD says Bronx was surrounded by his loving family members of the BPD Honor Guard and Canine Team when he crossed over the Rainbow Bridge. The department says Bronx won several awards during his service and enjoyed 4 years of retired life, loving on his family and lounging around the house. Last week, BPD announced the passing of another retired canine, Jax.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to KGET.com.